It's time for Remodel Revolution. And now, an award-winning contractor with over 40 years' experience. Here is Alex Guthrie.
Well, you're probably getting ready for your big electric bills because they're going to be coming. It's about to get hot. And there's a couple of ways that you can help that. One is with insulation, and one is with duct repair. And today we're going to talk mostly about insulation when we come back. I had a viewer send me a note a few weeks ago and asked me why I don't like rock wool insulation. I guess I made a comment along the line somewhere about that I don't. And it's true, I don't. And I don't because of what it's made from and because of all the years I've been remodeling and having to deal with old houses that have it. Breathing it is pretty nasty. And let me tell you a little bit of what it's comprised of. It's made from basalt rock, which is, I don't know what that is, and I don't know if I said it right. It's basalt, so I'm calling it basalt. You can correct me if you feel compelled to do so. And recycled slag. And recycled slag is a byproduct of the steel and copper industry. It's basically where they take all the little cutoffs and the little slaggy stuff and they grind it all up to where it makes these little fibers, and they stick it in with all of the other fibrous material, and it comes in big giant blocks, or the old stuff came in paper, but it was only maybe 2.5, 3 inches thick, as opposed to what we have now, which is of course 14 inches thick. And so the problem with it is that it floats. And if you have a leaky attic, let's say your attic door, I know a lot of times I walk in a house and I'll walk down a hallway where the attic access is, and I can smell the attic air. Like if you're in your house and you smell attic air, that's because attic air is leaking into or being pulled into the main part of the house, sometimes from your air conditioner. But a lot of times those old doors that are the pull down stairs, or a lot of houses still have scuttle holes. We call them scuttle holes. It's a little piece of plywood that you push up and you get up on a ladder, you climb through to get into your attic. We call that a scuttle hole. They leak air like crazy into the house. So if you have an attic full of rock wool insulation, guess what's getting pulled into your house? the best thing to do with rock wool, particularly if you're going to re-insulate your attic, is to vacuum it out. We have a video here, not a video, but an image of that very thing going on. This is these guys get in with these giant vacuums and they actually suck it out and they get it out of there. And that is absolutely the only way to deal with it. Just get rid of it before you put the new stuff down. Now, if you have a house that was built prior to 1990, 1995, if you have a house that's 30 years old or older, you need to go in and check the insulation and check the ductwork in your attic, particularly if you're getting really high energy bills, if you have a lot of dust everywhere, if you smell attic air or stale air in your house, that's generally an indicator that you have some duct leakage, or you have something like that. Maybe that attic, that pull down stair that has a ladder on it, that old creaky, dangerous thing is hanging down on one corner. That's real common. You know, the little springs that hold them up don't hold them forever. They get weak. They start kind of hanging down. They get warped. That thing needs to be replaced. Now, we did a video. I put a video up, and I'm going to put a new video up about some attic stairs that I found at the Sunbelt Builder Show that I really like, and just sort of the new way they're doing them now to put up a sealed unit up there instead of the old-timey, which was just basically a piece of plywood with a ladder on it. So let's talk a little bit about insulation. So if you're considering insulating your attic, there are many other products other than rock wool. And down here in Texas, I don't know of anybody that uses rock wool. They might. There might be somebody that does, and there may be some old guys that still like it. I don't know who they are. But I wanted to make that statement because if you live in an older home, particularly if it was built in the 30s or 40s, it's very likely, if it hasn't been insulated or re-insulated, that it's got rock wool in it. And so make sure and get it out of there if you can. Okay, so here's some things to consider if you're going to do blown-in insulation in your attic. So most of the time now we're going in and we're blowing insulation in because we can put a thick blanket that would be 14, 15 inches, 20 inches if we want, and we can just blow it and put this big, beautiful blanket of insulation in, and it really, really affects the performance of the house. So the air conditioning will hold, it'll hold heat, it'll hold cool, and it won't leak as much air through it. And the key to insulation is the fluffiness, actually. The air needs to get in between those fibers. It needs to be controlled that way. So the fluffier, the better. It's sort of like having a down blanket on you in the wintertime if it's really cold outside, and it's a big fluffy down blanket. It actually will keep you warmer. It's the same thing with the insulation, same concept. So there's a few rules if you're going to go down the route of adding inches and inches of insulation to your attic. If you have a overhang on your house, and typically around here they're only around 12 inches, and you look up and you'll see soffit vents or eave vents, and that's how air is. It's designed to let air up into your attic, circulate through your attic, and get the hot air out. And down here, we're fighting the heat. Our winters are mild, but the summers are brutal. So we want the heat to get out so that everything in the attic performs better and the house is more comfortable. If you're going to add layers and layers of blowing in insulation, you need to allow the air from the outside to still circulate through your attic. And that would mean that there needs to be a little piece. Now, these are tips I'm giving you to talk to your insulation company about, or your contractor, before they change your insulation. This is a major change in your house when you do this, and so several things need to be thought out. One is called a baffle, It's a BAFFLE. A roof baffle will actually allow, it goes down on the lower part of the attic into the eave, and it allows air to come straight through up into the area above the new insulation. So if you're adding 10 inches of insulation, you need to put a 12-inch baffle and allow that air to get up there and circulate. Also, you need to check and make sure that your ducts aren't leaking. Are we still on? So we'll have to edit this. And so the baffles go down into the eave, they come up, they help the air circulate above the new insulation. We need to check for proper venting and plumbing and dryer vents. Now I've been in houses, particularly the older houses, where the dryer vents and the bathroom vents just dump up in the attic. And that's horrible. That's a really not good thing. And so before you start adding insulation, you need to have somebody go through your attic and make sure that things are vented properly, vented to the eaves, vented to the roof. The bathroom vents, a lot of times will go up to a roof vent and just kind of blow out it, and that's fine. Sometimes they'll go over into an eave and they'll dump out of an eave. That's fine too. We just don't want them trapping or sending a bunch of moist air up into your attic, because it'll get trapped and create mold and other kind of problems. And so we want to check and make sure all those vents are done properly. We also want to check. Now, I was in a house recently in an attic where somebody had taken a dryer vent and just let it blow up in the attic. That's something that we've quit doing in the 80s. You know, when we figured out dryer lint from your clothes has a very, very low flash point. And so even a little bit of static electricity can cause that to flash. You do not want that collecting under your house or in your attic. So make sure that that's all addressed before they start adding insulation. Also, a biggie is if you have recessed cans, and if you haven't changed them to the new LEDs, which use a lot less heat, then if you have an older can, you need to put a box over it that guards it from having the insulation cover it. If it does cover it, the little sensor inside that light will make that light go off and on, because it's not getting air and controlling the heat inside that can. And so there's all kinds of little things. Now, most of this with a good insulation company is standard procedure, and they'll go over it with you. But a lot of people kind of aren't really acting like they should. In other words, there's a lot of people that are working off the books. This is a real typical thing in all of our construction industry in general. But they'll kind of work off the books, and they'll work for a whole lot cheaper, but they're not always abiding by these kind of basic rules that you need to know. I have a lot of people when I'm looking at houses, and they'll say, hey, my lights are flickering, or my lights are cutting on and off, and it's almost always has to do with the insulation in the attic if it's not electrical. So make sure and go through that process. There's a super important part of this, which is making sure that your attic is properly ventilated. And there's a formula, and I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to have to read it. The attic square footage divided by 4. So if you have 200 square feet, divide it by 4, you have 50 square feet or square inches of exhaust. And so the typical attic vent that goes in your roof, a little pancake vent, will be 12 by 12. And so you can calculate the amount of square inches of ventilation you need for your attic. A lot of times a roofer will do that A lot of times they don't. This is a big problem I have found over the years when proper venting is not done when they put a new roof on a house, and then we've created this really untenable environment underneath the roof. And it's real simple. The amount of air going out has to equal the amount of air coming in. You've got to be able to have an equal amount coming in, equal amount going out. It's pretty simple. This controls heat gain. It controls moisture control or moisture buildup. There's a lot of reasons for this. Now, your roofer also, and maybe your insulator, might recommend doing a power ventilator or power roof vent. I really am not a fan of them. And I know I've gotten in some trouble with some people, roofers in particular. Hey man, they're solar, they're great, they never quit working. Well, they do quit working. And anything that's motorized is going to quit working eventually. And so if you have passive ventilation is always preferred, always. And we have all sorts of, they even have all kinds of new roof vents now that are pretty good looking, but ridge vents are good, lower vents are good. And so I'm not a fan at all of any sort of mechanical ventilation. And I also have this argument with my AC guys sometimes when they're talking about bringing outside air in. The problem I have with it is that when that stuff goes out, if the motor goes out and it quits venting, you don't know as the homeowner. You don't know until you have a problem. So my recommendation is that you use passive ventilation so you just don't ever have to worry about it again. And it could be a whirly-bird, but it doesn't have to be. You can use what's called a static vent, which is it just looks like a little square on your roof. They work fine. So remember that when that's being recommended, challenge them on it and make sure that they're making the best decision for you. Now, another thing that you need to do if you're going to insulate your attic is you need to make sure before they get in there and blow the insulation that you do duct leakage test. According to the EPA, there is a 30 to 40% air loss on average for forced air. And forced air is simply your air conditioning, and it's forcing the air into your home. And the main thing that makes it efficient is that the ducts are tight and they're not leaking air. As much air as possible is actually going where it's intended to go. And I'll tell you, a lot of times we find ductwork has been damaged or cut, or it has been stepped on, or it's just simply disconnected up in the attic. I go into attics all the time. Over the years, I can't tell you how many I've been in where I'll find a piece of duct laying there blowing cold air into the attic. And so if I go into your attic in July or August and it's cooler than your living room, we know that we've got a problem with that. So checking your ductwork is really, really important to make sure that this whole system works correctly. So let's go over the system real quick. The system is passive air ventilation, adequate insulation, and air duct leakage. These are the things that are going to help you get that bill down. Now, I did this on my house, and I added 14 inches of insulation. I changed the ductwork, some of the ductwork. I upgraded some of it. I was able to completely remove an entire zone, in other words, an entire air conditioning system out of my house, because my house all of a sudden was that much more insulated, and the ductwork and the system was running a lot more efficient. That meant that from the day that was finished, my next electric bill was 40% cheaper than the previous month. It was substantial. And so this stuff really has an immediate impact on your budget. So those are my tips today. And make sure and contact me with any comments, any questions. I'd be happy to make recommendations if you need me to on reputable AC people. I hope you have a great week. Until next week, this is Alex Guthrie signing off. Imagine this, a totally customized, organized, and beautiful master closet. A home office that fits right into a perfect space. A pantry designed specifically for your storage needs. Imagine your home totally organized. It's time to call the design professionals at Closets by Design DFW and turn your dreams into a reality. With a design staff over 30 strong, Closets by Design works directly with you to create your dream space, and they build it locally, helping support the DFW community. Check them out at dallas.closetsbydesign.com or call them at 972-361-0010. Use the promo code RRV to find out about the amazing specials and discounts available. That's dallas.closetsbydesign.com or call them at 972-361-0010, and don't forget that promo code RRV, Closets by Design. It's only a few short weeks until we'll be running our air conditioners all day and all night. Hey, it's time to get an HVAC tune-up scheduled. Call my friends at Total Air and Heat in Plano, Texas at 972-881-0020 right now and get on their schedule for a tune-up. Don't wait for the long lines. Get ahead of the crowd. Total Air has been servicing North Dallas and Plano and Richardson areas for over 60 years. Steve and Justin Lawton sell and service Carrier brand heating and cooling systems with Green Speed Intelligence technology. So give them a call at 972-881-0020 or contact them at totalair.com. Well, you may have thought you got away with a nice, cool, breezy, wet July, and for the most part we did for the first half, but guess what? It's about to turn 100 degrees every day. Summertime has finally arrived in Texas, and that means that you're probably going to be watering your yard. So I invited my good friend, Mr. Sprinkler, Daryl Davis with Texas Water Boys to come into the show, and we're going to talk some sprinklers. So good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you,
Alex. That's good. Yeah. That's good. It's always fun having you here.
It's good to be here.
So now we're finally going to have to start watering our lawns.
Yep.
And we're going to have these massive water bills along with our massive electric bills, right, because we're also going to be running our air conditioners a lot more.
Yep.
And I wanted to talk to you about, first of all, knowing that we're going to have to go in and do this as a homeowner, what should they have somebody check, like a sprinkler company like yours, Texas Water Boys, come out and check the system and make sure it's running. It's not making big giant puddles around the yard. It's the valves aren't leaking, all that kind of it. Let's start out with a real basic, how does a sprinkler system work? In a yard, or we're talking about a yard sprinkler system.
Yeah, lawn irrigation. So obviously most systems have a controller, most of the time in the garage, on an outdoor sidewall. The controller operating the valves that operate the pressurized line in the lawn that opens and closes on demand electrically to tell that particular sprinkler zone on your system to open, allow water to come through, and then go to the spray.
So if you looked at your lawn, and you were looking at straight down on it, like you're looking at it from the bird's eye view, and you can imagine your lawn in a grid pattern. There's little lines going across it. That's part of the system of how it's designed. And then the other thing will be, a particular type of sprinkler head hitting a plant, an ornamental garden, or maybe some pots or something like that. And so that's what Daryl's talking about when he's talking about the zones. That's called a zone. So there might be 3 or 4 sprinkler heads that hit a certain area for 20 minutes, and then it's going to cut off, and that's a zone. And then it's going to go and hit sprinkler heads at another part. And to make that happen, under the ground, the water lines are feeding those sprinkler heads. They go to a little electronic valve system, and that it's a little valve that opens and closes, and it has to be notified electronically. That's the part in the garage. And you'll see little timers and things like that on it, and each zone has a number or letter or some designation, right?
Right, correct.
So, okay, so I wanted to just kind of,
Simplify.
when you understand it like Daryl does, it sounds like heart surgery.
But
We
less
have to get
expensive.
simple. Yeah, it's a lot less expensive than heart surgery.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So those valves, those section valves that are in the yard, the wires that go from those valves back to the controller gets programmed and tells those valves what day and times to come on and how long to run before they shut back down again. That's operating those particular zones.
It's kind of like having a shower head upside down in the
Right.
yard.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
Essentially, it's all the same,
Yes.
only different.
Yes. Exactly.
And so some of the things that happens to those valves is that in the winter time, and we had a pretty brutal one this year, they can freeze, even if they're designed not to, if the system may have just a little bit of water in it.
Right.
And so what's the telltale of that?
Well, so electric valves had a tendency to either stick on or stay closed. And what you have, and when you get severe cold weather, like we had in February, you get a lot of splintering pipe in a low drainage. So pipe holds water. The water runs to the lowest point in the pipe, and it'll just sit there until you turn your system on in the spring or the summer to flush that water out and then start using your system. So throughout the winter, the water will either set in the valve, set in the main line, or set in one of these lateral pipes. And then when we get severe weather like in February, when you do turn the system on,
Freeze and burst.
Yeah, freeze and burst. So you've got these pipes that have been sitting for a month or two just waiting for you to activate. And once you do, you find out you have a splintering pipe or a small leak. And small leaks become big leaks, or small fractures become large fractures. And so that's kind of the...
So if you see cattails growing in your
Yes,
front yard,
yes.
you've got...
or if one part of your yard is a little greener than the other,
or
there's a chance that you've got some water
You're
coming
walking
in.
out there to work in the flower bed, and you sink
Right.
to your knee in mud.
The
Okay.
mosquitoes are really happy. And
Okay. So what happens a lot of times is people will ask their yard man to fix the
Right.
sprinkler.
Correct.
And your yard man isn't necessarily a sprinkler expert.
Right.
In fact, he's not.
Right.
And so, give us some advice on that.
Well, the state mandates that any time you open up a main line, which is the line that is tied to your potable water supply, your drinking water at your water meter, that pipe cannot be disrupted, connected to, rerouted without a licensed technician. So the state of Texas has a licensing program for irrigation where you have a licensed irrigator and then you have a licensed technician. The problem with that is it's not enforced. There's not enough enforcement in the state of Texas, cities, municipalities to enforce what the state has mandated.
Well, plus you can just go up to a box store and get the parts.
Right. You go
And
to Home
that's what
Depot.
happens.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
But when you have a system installed by a professional irrigation contractor and they go through the design and the design measures and calculates what is required for that particular property, the box store or the DIY or the lawn maintenance person that you have on your property, they're not necessarily going to match that type of head, that type of valve, or you may not even be able to purchase that same type of head or valve in that most contractors, professional contractors, are buying a professional line of product.
And it's a grade of product. So
Correct.
there's a higher quality grade and a lower quality grade, and the lower quality grade's the one that just broke, probably.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's
Yeah.
just It's part of being in any industry or any being a professional, being licensed. It's just part of the process of trying to, and really it goes back to water efficiency. A licensed irrigation technician or irrigator is looking also as how efficient is that system, and then the type of nozzle that you put on, or the type of head. You're putting it on there to not waste water. So you're looking at how efficient is it covering the property, the grass, the lawn, the shrubs, or is it spraying over concrete?
So if you see water running down the
Right,
street,
correct.
what does that mean?
Well, it could be-
Besides the concrete doesn't grow.
No, right. So, yeah. So, running down the street means you're overwatering, or you have a broken head or a broken main line. Our dense clay soil will only take on so much water before you have runoff. And so that's why a lot of irrigators will tell a client that, or teach them on cycle and soak, where you water until you see runoff, and then you stop watering, and then you come right back again and water right on top of that.
And so we're kind of going by depth of
Yes,
moisture,
right.
and what is it? It used to be an inch or something.
Right,
Is that-
right. And so now, even though we all have clay soil, it's all about the prep. So it could be that if you have sandy loam mixed in with your clay soil, so a flower bed has a different rate of absorption than, say, your lawn, unless it was prepped with a sandy loam. But for the most part, it's all based on, like what you're saying, it's based on certain conditions in Texas.
and how it absorbs.
And how it absorbs.
And so as a professional irrigator, lawn irrigator, you kind of have to kind of cross a little bit of a line into that landscaping
Right,
knowledge.
right.
And so when you're hiring somebody that isn't a professional, and this is where I'm trying to go with this, you're not going to get that. You know, they just don't know. It's not that they're bad people.
Nope.
They just don't know.
Nope.
And so I really think that's super important. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why. Our population is exploding in North Texas. Now, we've been really fortunate the last few years. We've had plenty of water. There will come a time when we don't.
Sure.
And it's the one of the most important things is to control things like watering yards. And when we see water running down the street, it drives me nuts.
Right.
It's just a total waste. It's a total waste.
Well,
of
and not
water.
to mention, I was on a job last week. And it was a commercial property, and the irrigation. So the large heads that you see on golf courses are a rotor type head that cover large areas of turf. And this was a commercial project that had large areas of turf with rotors. But this was the morning, I think it was Tuesday morning, maybe Monday when we got the rain, the big cloud burst early in the morning.
Monsoon, yeah.
Right, and so the system is just running for the next 2 hours on this large.
Regardless. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so going back to your point of the water, when you do see runoff, it would be to check your rain and freeze sensor and make sure too that.
And let's talk about that real quick and explain the rain and freeze sensor. I totally forgot about
Yeah.
that.
So it's mandated that every system have a functioning rain and freeze sensor by most cities. I believe the cutoff is like 15,000 or less population. It's not required. I could be wrong, and it could be down to 5,000 or whatever. But it's required that every system have a rain and freeze sensor. That rain and freeze sensor is mounted somewhere where it can have sunshine and rain. And there's different varieties, wireless, that talk to each other without hardwire. But the main purpose is that if we get temperatures below 32 degrees, 33, you can set what you want it to be set at, whether it's 32 or your amount of moisture at 1/4 of an inch before it shuts off. But it measures rainfall and weather conditions to say, I'm not going to come on today. I'm not going to water because it tells me.
Because I don't need to.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
And so, in the overall maintenance of these systems, is it basically go in the springtime,
Correct.
or winter time, whenever? When would you recommend people start looking at?
Well, spring, but in Texas, and especially North Texas, it's usually we become booked out about the 3rd week in February, historically. And so you want to be with a contractor lined up for that spring tune-up, that spring checkup, somewhere at the 3rd week in February, the end of February, going into March. And what you'll find as you get closer into March, April, and especially May, and especially this year, that right now we're running 2 weeks behind, and it'll stay 2 weeks behind through most of the summer. But early on, we were close to a month behind because the February freeze, and then so many people had so much damage and they couldn't catch up.
Right.
And so spring is
There was a lot of things.
right.
So,
Yeah.
The world
Yes,
went
yes,
crazy.
yes.
Well, one other thing before we go that I want to touch on real quick is that we're about to go into a real dry period, and it's about to get really hot, and it's really about a month behind. It usually starts 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we got a nice little break.
Right.
And your foundation, where the dirt around your foundation is going to dry out, and it's going to shrink. And I want to tell you that your sprinkler system is not designed to control that. It is designed to control the life of the yard or the grass or the ornamentals. They don't, watering your foundation, I have so many people tell me, they'll call me up and say, man, I think my foundation's moving and I'm watering enough.
Right.
And I go, well, it's two different things.
Yes.
And so that's really important that you know that, because we'll have someone on here in a couple of weeks that we're going to talk about the foundations, because that's going to be the first thing that happens is I'll start getting phone calls about cracks in walls and things, and that'll become important. I really appreciate you coming in.
Oh, absolutely.
And spending the
Love
morning
being
with
here,
us.
yeah.
Kind of called you at midnight, said, get up, wake up, wake up, wake up, get your hair done. And you did. Yeah, you're looking great, looking good, looking good. Daryl Davis with Texas Water Boys in Dallas. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The views and opinions of this program are for educational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended to replace the recommendations of a hired professional.
You can catch Remodel Revolution anytime. Follow the show on the website, remodelrevolutionradio.com, or on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, using the handle at Remodel Revolution Radio. You can always listen to the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn. And watch the show anytime on YouTube.